Welcome to the Crypto Blue Hour. I'm Eric. This is Charlie. Every week we get together and give an insider's perspective of the crypto space. Today we're going to chat about how a person can get funds on a blockchain and what that means, and what wallets are and what different kind of wallets are available. But first, Charlie, how was your week?
It was good, man. Things are good. Back in New York, a lot of traveling in March. Excuse me. three time zones, 2 continents. It was fun. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, good week. Hanging out in Austin. My partner did a half marathon over the weekend. So we did like a day trip out to the middle of nowhere, Texas, which was fun. There's these interesting communities. Like the one that we went to, Fredericksburg, has weird German influence. So there's a bunch of German beer houses and stuff.
Oh,
And
cool.
it's like 90 minutes outside of Austin. So it was fun.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Nice. Congratulations to Maddie. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. It was a great, brought it home.
That's what I'm talking about, dude.
Yeah.
Awesome. This is a good one. We got like a user submission. And actually, this is something we've spoken about a lot of times, just like in general, but it'd be nice to spend like a concerted amount of time on wallets and getting things on chain. One of the things we're talking about pre-show is how many wallets your boy Scruffy Chuck has. I have 25 wallets that I'm keeping track of. So that means that there are many more I don't keep track of.
And for reference, I basically have 2.
Yeah, so you don't need to have 25.
Yeah.
You just maybe I'm a little neurotic. But I definitely have them all in like this big mind mapping tool, so I can see which ones are related to which. And like, I don't know why it matters, but I do think it's interesting. I have the vast majority of them are browser based wallets, which means that where should we start? Where do you want to start us off?
Because the question before we even get into that is,
yeah,
would you say that's the equivalent of having like 25 checking accounts or 25 savings accounts?
That's a good question. I think for context, very few of them have anything of substance inside. They've mostly, because there are so many different types of wallets that are available to try to use. MetaMask is probably the most popular browser-based wallet, so everybody has at least. So is one of your 2 MetaMask? It's got to be.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have many versions of MetaMask. I don't know why, but I have many versions of them. And then there's also other options from MetaMask, right? Robbie, there's Soulflare, there's Sender, there's Hashpack, there's a whole bunch of different browser-based wallets. And so I've tried out many of them. And then you send a little bit of funds there and you're able to play around a little bit. So I don't think of those as checking accounts as much as like they're maybe like, depending on whether or not because not all wallets are able to access all networks or all DLTs. So like Hedera has its own wallets that are proprietary. They're trying to integrate with MetaMask, but that's not come to fruition yet. It won't be probably till May. Yeah. And then there are Bitcoin based wallets as well. Most of them aren't browser wallets though. You can't use Bitcoin really with MetaMask, for example. And so MetaMask is really for EVM chains, Ethereum virtual machine. So like you could use it on many different things, but like Solana isn't compatible with MetaMask. So Soulflare is one I've used for Solana. I don't really play with Solana very much, but I do have that wallet. You know what I mean? So I think I really have one wallet that has the vast majority of anything that's useful to me. And where like if you were to send any sort of crypto to like scruffychuck.wallet, which is an address that I have and I own, it would go to this one wallet where all my NFTs are and like where all of my like, anything if you wanted to like check on what it is that I have in my wallet to validate that I have certain NFTs or I went to certain events or certain tickets, you'd look at that one wallet and that's the one that I share with people really. But I do have many others that haven't been associated with that have more anonymity, and just like it's fun to like play with operational security if you're like a weird operational security nerd like I am and you're just interested in like whether or not you can do it. I actually have some wallets that are completely air gapped. They've never connected to any Wi-Fi that I've personally owned through my router. And so like, that's a weird thing that I like to practice sometimes for no reason. Like, I don't know. I'm not Edward Snowden. I just think it's interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that the vast majority of them are technically worthless. Maybe not technically, but like practically worthless. But a couple of them, maybe one realistically has any substantial, like a couple $100 on it. And then I have a hardware wallet where I hold the vast majority of any sort of assets that are worth anything. Yeah. But since we're down bad right now in the market, it's pretty much worth nothing. So I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good breakdown. So not really different checking accounts, but we use the term playing around a lot, which is accurate because it's all very new tech and you can play around with it and it's fun. It's probably the reason we like it. But
Exactly. And like that, you're incentivized to as well, because this last week, I know we don't have anything on the docket in terms of news really, but like there was this Arbitrum airdrop, which for anybody who doesn't follow crypto, that sounds like a weird sentence that makes no sense. But anybody who's in crypto, it's like, oh, the Arbitrum airdrop happened this week.
Yeah.
And so you're incentivized to go to this new network, connect a wallet there. And not all these networks necessarily are EVM compatible or MetaMask compatible, to use a wallet as an example. And so you go in there, you download a new wallet, you practice and like play around intentionally
You
with
could have used
fake money.
MetaMask for that one though.
Exactly, yeah, you could, because it's a roll up on Ethereum. But you're incentivized to go in there and play with it before it's actually launched, and then you're literally dropped into the wallet that you use a bunch of tokens. And like, depending on how much degenning you do or how much fun you're having or how much playing around you're getting, you could make, you could actually be airdropped thousands of dollars of worth of tokens. And that was like all the rage this week in terms of what people are talking about.
Yeah, and I was in on that too, which is cool. I got thousands of dollars, which is cool.
Oh, I love to hear that. Cool. I didn't know that. That's awesome.
I haven't claimed it. Yeah. But yeah, playing around is one of those things where people don't quite understand. And they're like, how could you get thousands of dollars of value? But it's a huge network. They incentivize people to test it out. They've received insane amounts of funding from VCs and other institutions. And they were able to create a governance token, airdrop it to community members, and they added enough liquidity at the onset. And the community did too, because they believe in it. So that's kind of where that comes from. But let's get into, let's talk about, where do you want to start?
I think maybe, I know that we wanted to talk about like how to get your money on chain, but I do think that maybe it makes sense to like think about like, there's a step before that, right? It's like,
you need a wallet.
You need a wallet, right? And so like so I was thinking about this, like there are prerequisites for even getting a wallet. Excuse me. Like my grand vision for this is that like one day we'll go through and redo all these episodes to make them much more succinct, since I'm a bambling idiot. But like I do think that maybe, and like make them make more sense, but like for different audiences maybe, because like this specifically, this little like 5 minute, maybe hopefully less, 30 seconds pitch I'm going to give is specific for people like my buddy Haggai who lives in Zambia. So the prerequisites at a high level are like internet access, right? You need to have internet access. You need to have a personal computer or a smartphone. So like a computer that has access to the internet. You need to have, let's talk about Bitcoin. So since these others are gas tokens is how we framed them and how I'd like to sort of think about them. Let's just focus on that for a moment. So you need a Bitcoin wallet software. And so it's going to actually be something that lives on your computer or lives on your smartphone. And it's a software that's downloaded through the internet. And that doesn't necessarily need to be self-custody, meaning that you're your own bank, as much as it means that it's just maybe something that's a third-party custody. It's like a Coinbase equivalent. But you need to have some sort, it's not just like inherently like your phone is ready to be Bitcoin compatible necessarily. You need some software, and then you need a secure internet connection. So it kind of goes without saying in terms of the internet. And then the wallet itself is going to have some steps to set it up. But those are just like the prerequisites before you even decide on a wallet. There are many types of wallets for Bitcoin specifically. I have that's a lot of my wallets are Bitcoin wallets that are just fun to play with. And some of them are really, really terrible UX, user experience, terrible. Mycelium, Disk, these are old ones I've been using for years that suck. But like they're like a part of like they're BISQ. I don't know if you've ever even heard of it, or Mycelium. These are like really old ones I downloaded on old computers that like they like are terrible, but they're like, but they are what they are. Like that's where I used to hold my Bitcoin before I had a hardware wallet. So you need those things in order to get started. But if that's like assuming that you need a wallet, and so you need internet connection and a personal computer ultimately. And then it's like, all right, what assets do I want to have in this wallet? And then that determines what kind of wallets you can use. So do you want Bitcoin? Do you want something that's agnostic, so you can have all of these different assets on it? That's a really, really potentially a good one. But then there are Bitcoin specifics that I think are also worth thinking about. But so yeah, I think like, what wallet do you want? Do you want to have 25? Probably not.
I think, what do you want to buy? I think a good practice for people is to figure out what you want to buy before you even go and press buy. Like a very regular thing, I think, for young users is they hear about prices going up and then they join a centralized exchange like Coinbase is the most popular in the US, which custodies your funds so you can sign up with an email address and a phone number, and then they will hold the funds for you. You just give them money, they charge you a fee, and then they hold the funds for you. That is a way to do it, but that doesn't necessarily encourage people to understand the reason why you should buy it. It's almost a negative because you can just go in there and they use marketing tactics like giveaways and like they'll do things where if you pass a test, you get $1 worth of a token. But
Yeah.
yeah, so figuring out what you want, and then you get the wallet from there. A Bitcoin wallet, for example, you can look it up. What do you recommend for a Bitcoin wallet?
There's a bunch of examples. Like there's Electrum, Exodus, Mycelium,
But if you
Treasure,
had to pick
Ledger.
one, yeah.
Um, for a Bitcoin wallet specifically, if you wanted to have just one, a cold card. That's what I would recommend. It's
Okay.
Bitcoin specific. It's completely off chain. It allows for you to have something that's like, it's actually fireproof. It's a piece of metal.
Yeah.
So if you really wanted to go full swing and be your own bank, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, right? So like so when you set up a wallet, let's talk about like what the actual process of all of these wallets are pretty much the same if you're going to self custody. If you're going to give the custody to someplace like Coinbase, maybe your onus is like, I want exposure to cryptocurrency, and like, good for you, I guess. That's cool. But ultimately, you're not really solving like the custody problem there, because they hold your funds. And in the same way that there are bank runs, and there is this weird perverse incentive with the way that banks are run, and which gets you fired up. I can see your nostrils fuming right now. Coinbase is obviously not that bad an actor, and like we both have spoken very highly of Brian Armstrong, who's the founder and this current CEO, and he has been the CEO since the genesis. But even still, do you want to trust somebody with your funds, or do you want to have your own funds yourself, which is the ethos of what Bitcoin really is: peer-to-peer e-cash without a middleman. So, I mean, if you want to use Coinbase, that's absolutely fine, and you don't have to necessarily worry about these things, because you can go through that "I forgot my password" setup, right? You don't have to worry about that, because they custody it for you, and they remove. It's easier, but you have very little control over your money. Yeah. Whereas if you want to actually take control, you have a lot of responsibility over that. That's a massive, 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 massive deal. And if you don't understand that, you probably shouldn't be involved with it. I think that's probably the biggest learning hurdle for the vast majority of people.
Yeah, you got to want it. Also, okay, so let's say you want full custody. What's the next step? You find this Fire Wallet. Fire Wallet's the name, yeah?
Cold card.
Cold card, damn it.
Yeah.
All right, well, you buy one, or yeah. Is this a hardware wallet?
Hardware wallet.
Wallet? Yeah. Okay, cool. So you buy this online, then what's the next step?
So you're going to get it. It's going to come to you. It's really the same for any of these wallets. MetaMask is very, very similar. It's going to come with, it's going to generate. So you're going to have to download some sort of software. If it's a MetaMask, it's going to be in the browser. It's an extension. It's not like a standalone application you download. It lives within the browser. That's a browser-based wallet. If you have a cold card or a Treasure or a Ledger, it's a hardware wallet. You're going to need to download an addendum software. It's going to be an independent software that runs on your machine, whether it's a PC or Mac. That's going to then ultimately generate brand new wallet address, which is what you want. But before it gives you that wallet address, it's going to actually provide you with the keys to that address. And so it provides you with a public key and a private key. The private key is yours. The private key is yours. Don't share that with anybody. Don't even share with your lady. Like, don't share with anybody unless you like you need to. But ultimately, like, there are ways around that, and around like the way that smart contracts work, the ability to share custody of something if something bad happens. Like, there are ways around that, and people are working on that, especially when it comes to like transfer of assets that are trustless. But ultimately, you shouldn't trust anybody with your private key. Your private key is yours. Yeah. The private key is something that it's a long hash. It's a hash of, it's an alphanumeric hash that's like, I don't know how many. Do you know how many it is? Like 32 or 24 characters. It's extremely weird, because ultimately, like, if I want to send you crypto and you give me your address and you read it out loud to me, it's hard. It's stressful. We've done this countless times sitting on the couch next to each other and been like, okay, 0x8. It's like really scary.
You got to do the paste. Yeah, you got to send it, copy paste, but
definitely. That's true. That's very true. Yeah. But also you can have an ENS that directs, like an Ethereum name service that directs to your address. And so you coordinate those. You send me some assets at scruffychuck.wallet, or what's yours?
DuncanSmothers.eth.
DuncanSmothers.eth.
Eric.eth. Yeah.
Oh yeah, ERICH. That's a money one. That's like an old school, like that's like u.com or something sick from back in the 90s. Yeah, that'll be a good one. Saw that one for millions. Eventually. So they've trying to solve for this at a high level, but ultimately when you're setting up the wallet, regardless of how it is that you've set it up, it's going to provide you with a private key, which is yours. And ultimately, like in terms of operational security, the private key has these like what do they call them? How do I frame this? Oh, a backup plan. It like provides a backup plan for you, which is like a forgot password type button, but it's not going to be available for you other than just when you're setting this wallet up. So it's a very serious time. Make sure that there's no distractions, there's no dogs running around, like there's no delivery people. Take 5 minutes and set this up really properly. You're going to want to ultimately take that backup plan. You're going to want to take the seed phrase, which it provides, which is 12 to 24 words that are randomly generated, and you're going to want to write those down, and you're going to want to write them down in handwriting. So you're going to want to write them down. You're not going to want to necessarily put them in a digital copy because maybe your internet's not secure. Maybe you're in a situation where you're on a public computer or using a public Wi-Fi. You don't necessarily want to be in a situation where your seed phrase, which is the key to all of the assets that are going to be on this wallet ultimately, which could be multiple Bitcoin or whatever it is that you're interested in, or NFTs. Happens all the time. People get their NFTs stolen, which are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in some instances, because they did not actually write these down physically. They instead saved them in some document, some notepad on their computer, and somebody gets access to their computer and they have their seed phrase all of a sudden. And that's the only thing they need in order to get in. Not only is it the username, it's also the password. There's no such thing as a username and password in these instances. Yeah. Some wallets have an additional password, which is like a veneer of security. But ultimately that if you, that's just sort of like a familiarity thing for people to like be able to use it with and like have a password. Seed phrase is a seed phrase. It's a long 12 or 24 word phrase that is ultimately your backup plan.
Yeah.
If you're not able to find your private key, or you didn't write that down, or you're having a hard time and you're inputting it incorrectly, you're going to be prompted to provide your seed phrase in its entirety in order to regenerate your wallet. If you don't have your seed phrase, you don't have your wallet. It's that simple. You're not going to be able to get your wallet. And so that's what I mean when I say that you are the bank. And so what I do is I write that down one time, and I fold that up and I put it somewhere, and then I write it down again, and I fold that up and I put it somewhere, and I write it down a third time, and I fold that away and I put it away, and then I put them in different places. And I don't do it immediately. I can't just like travel. Yeah. But, I go somewhere and I put one far away, and then I put one close by, and I put one in a different place. So like I have them in very, very disparate places in case anything. And it's not even like I have that much money. I'm just like sort of nerdy about it. Yeah. But nonetheless, I think it's really important. I just like, it's like a weird neurosis. But I think it's fun to think about. So like it's so a little bit of a ramble there, but what else?
It's like having a vault. It's like having a very high security vault with a bunch of cash in it that the only way to get in is through this sequence of numbers. And if you lose the sequence of numbers, nobody can hack into the vault. Like,
exactly.
It's encrypted. So you need that. Otherwise you're completely locked out.
And your wallet address is independent from this. And so when you generate a wallet, you have a wallet address, which is public facing. And that allows for you to, I share that. I send that over text to Eric. Eric can then send me funds to that alphanumeric 24 character large, very weird string of letters and numbers. And ultimately then for me to validate that I want to send something, it's going to provide a public key, which can be seen by somebody like Eric, but then that's actually an encrypted representation of my wallet that I validate while I send something with my private key. So it's a little bit complicated. It doesn't really matter. But I do think that, you're not going to necessarily need to remember your private key. You're not necessarily going to even need to know your public key. Those are things you're going to be prompted to use when you're making a transaction or sending something. So those are a little bit outside of the scope of this conversation, although I did mention them. But your seed phrase is immensely important because that's your backup plan. That is your only backup plan. And then your public wallet address is okay. Everybody's going to know it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's scary. It can be scary. For me, it was a big hurdle. And at first I was like, I'll just copy it and put it on my computer, which is bad because if you click on a bad link or somebody, you would be surprised how easy it is to hack into somebody's computer. And if people know that you have X amount of money and they can hack your email address or your Google Drive or something like that, then they have access to all your funds, which is why we always tell people that you need to keep it somewhere physically located, ideally in a way. I have these stone tablet things that are fireproof, and you punch out the letters of the words and you can put in there, and that even if the house catches on fire, you still have your seed phrases in there, which is cool.
We had mentioned in an earlier episode the idea of taking a door hinge, if you really if in 50 years, and if we're able to put away some money in Bitcoin or something like that, which is not currently feasible, so don't be coming knocking on my door. But nonetheless, like you're able to put it on these door hinges and like have it such that the door hinge, which is adjacent to the wall, has the seed phrase punched into it, something like that. Like that operational security is next level. That's like Michael Saylor security.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. But yeah, the stronger your backup plan with those seed phrases, the better. And then ultimately, don't worry about the fact that your public address is like that. That's a big part of this, is that ultimately your public address is your public address. And so I just told you guys my Ethereum, or like my ENS, my Ethereum name service, scruffychuck.wallet. That means you can go check out a lot of those transactions. That means that that's publicly visible. That means that that is associated with me, and I'm okay with that. And that's a big part of this, is ultimately, if you're going to be taking self-custody and being involved in this at a high level, you're going to make it such that you are visible. And so people like Ashton Kutcher, or somebody, and they're, they're making it very clear who they are. That's a massive sort of, that's a decision you need to make that takes some, you need to think about that. That's not like oh yeah, laissez-faire. Like that's a kind of a big deal. It's definitely a different sort of way to interact. Money is a very weird personal thing. Not everybody likes to talk about money, which is reasonable, but I wish we talked about it more, because it would make it much less sort of like this like weird thing in the room. But ultimately, like it is a public address, and that's why it might make sense to have two different versions, two different wallets, two different like instances, one of which is not associated, one that is associated publicly, so you can have a little bit of like anonymity if you need to, right? If you don't want to be walking around flashy, I got a Rolex on the man, that's not your style. Maybe you don't want your Charles.eth, which I don't own, but maybe you don't want that associated with you because you want to have some anonymity. So like keep that in mind as well, is that these public addresses are public. That's what that's what that means. And so people are going to be able to potentially, if they send it to you once, they could technically then track that address forever in the same way anybody could, because all these blockchains, these distributed ledgers, are inherently public. That's the whole, at least the ones that we're talking about, they are all public, which is the value proposition is positive, but that transparency is somewhat negative to some people.
Yeah, dope. Dig it.
Yeah.
What about
wallets?
Wallets, dude. All right. So you have a wallet. What can you do? You create your seed phrase, or you have your seed phrase. You write it down. You hide it. You don't put it anywhere digitally. You store multiple copies. What's the next step? So say we have a Bitcoin wallet, and you want to buy Bitcoin. What would you do?
So now you have a wallet, but it has nothing on it. It's empty. How do you get your money on chain? I guess it's like, is that the next step you're thinking about?
Yeah.
Like onboarding fiat.
Yeah. I got cold hard cash. I got a Bank of America card.
Yeah, exactly. Interestingly, I remember when I was much younger, I was very interested that there's a section of Craigslist, and there's also these interesting dApps. Like Bisq is inherently a marketplace in and of itself. It's a decentralized exchange in a very unique way. It doesn't have an automated market maker. It's like I can feel the eyes roll as I even say that, because people don't even know what that means, which is absolutely fine. But what it is it's a double-sided marketplace. Bisq is, and it allows for people to offer to sell somebody Bitcoin for a price, and somebody else comes in and they say, I want to buy that from you using Zelle, or I want to come in and I want to buy that, and I'll send you a check, or something like that. And it allows for that interaction. So it's peer-to-peer. Internet e-cash, look at that. But Bisq is very old school. Very few people use it. I remember trying many times, but there are very few people who are selling, and I wanted to be a buyer. It didn't ever work, unfortunately. There are better versions, like RoboSats is one that you can find on Twitter. There are other marketplaces such as those, which are all peer-to-peer. It'd be like digitally meeting up with somebody in Austin, passing them $100, and them sending you to your wallet address $100 in Bitcoin. That'd be like that. Those are somewhat hard to scale. As you can imagine, even just me trying to explain it sounds esoteric and odd. There are also Bitcoin ATMs, right? Like Bitcoin ATMs are an option. I've seen them in many places. I was at a bar last weekend. They have a Bitcoin ATM. I think it's interesting. You need to have a wallet, right? So you have a wallet and you're able to send it your address, scan a QR code, and get that to send to you, and so on and so forth. That's like sort of an intermediary. And then there's also centralized exchanges, which are by far the easiest option, unless you live in like a Bitcoin native environment. Like I can imagine El Salvador, Bitcoin Beach, which is the name of an area there. I can imagine there it's relatively simple to find somebody on the beach, and you're like, I've got $100 cash. Who wants to send me some Bitcoin? And I bet you there'd be 1,000 people who are like, I'd love to send you some Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But in reality, that's not the vast majority of places in the world. The vast majority of places, even in New York City, there are ads on Craigslist. Those ads creep me out because I don't necessarily trust people to be true to their word in that instance, right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a weird situation. So what you would want to do for me, the way that I onboard all my fiat, or yeah, I think probably all of it has been through Coinbase. You have to find a trusted third party. Trusted is relative. So a centralized exchange is always going to be similar to a bank, as far as I'm concerned. So Coinbase being in New York, I'm limited by the bit license. I can't use something like Kraken. I can't use something like Binance. Binance is actually illegal in the United States, but there are many, many options. But in New York, they're relatively limited. Coinbase and Gemini are the two largest. Maybe there are financial like much larger sort of like institutional players like Swan or something like that. But for me as a retail user, Coinbase is a really good option. You have to provide, in comparison to doing this on the street with somebody where I don't have to provide them anything. I just have to give them the cash. In order to use a centralized exchange in the United States, you need to provide almost always, in New York for sure, always, your name, your social security number, your date of birth, your telephone number, all of this personal identifying information, PII, which is something that, is sort of against the ethos of this industry. But nonetheless, it's something that is a requirement, and that's the way that these things work. And ultimately, when you think about your Bitcoin address in general, it is something that's trackable. So what are you trying to hide from? Probably nothing. You're not a criminal. It's okay. And so, you would go through these third parties. You go through Coinbase. I have my bank account set up that I can send fiat automatically to Coinbase. Very simplistically, it comes in within a few days in the same way you'd expect for any ACH transfer to go through. And so you're just like sort of on those old banking rails in order to onboard into the new banking rails is the way that I think about it. And then you're able to take that money from Coinbase. And from there, that's like an intermediary. You're not self-custodying that money, but you do have your own wallet address there from which you can send to your self-custodied wallet, which we've already set up earlier. So we set up that wallet. We can send things from Coinbase. Once you buy that Bitcoin there, you go ahead and send that Bitcoin to your off-chain wallet, and then it's yours. It's all yours.
And then you can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good breakdown. That's the same way I do it as well. Coinbase is a lot of the problems that are happening with SVB and all the banks this past 2 months have been fractional reserve banking but Coinbase has one-to-one backed. They're a publicly traded company and they report on it very regularly how much they're holding in wallets. So when you buy $100 of Bitcoin, ideally they hold $100 Bitcoin for you and they're committed to that. And then when you send it, you have it. So I see it as a pretty good, for now, system, which has worked for me.
But I agree. And when people somebody asked me yesterday, I told them Coinbase. Like,
easy.
I don't think it's really that big of you're not really like relinquishing that much power because ultimately they allow for you to offboard your crypto into your own wallet, which is really the biggest piece. And the more that you read about Brian Armstrong, the more that you realize he actually is a DeFi and like decentralization like he's a proponent for that. Yeah. It's not like he's like it's not like he is going to like all of a sudden turn off the switch and not allow for anything to leave any longer. And not to say that he can't, and that's why I get it out of there.
They started it as a Bitcoin wallet. That's what he was trying to build. And then he realized people just wanted to buy it and they couldn't. So the goal has been to make it easier for people to buy it since then.
I remember you saying that. It's cool. I haven't watched that documentary yet, but so what else, my man? I know we wanted to keep it within 30. We're right about that number here. So
yeah, I guess as far as wallets, like the trade-offs of owning versus, we could do just a quick close-up of like why do you like holding funds on chain in a wallet that you own versus a centralized exchange, or even having that money in fiat and putting it in a savings account,
Yeah, I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, I like having ownership of my funds. Originally, I got into crypto because I had been saving money and holding it in like an Ally savings account, which earned, the interest kept going down. And I thought I was saving a bunch of money, but I was like, oh, I'm going to make less than $500 in interest this year on all this money. And with the way inflation's going, I think I'm going to end up potentially losing some money with it going up. So I enjoy being able to do things that allow me to offset inflation for the most part. And I've been able to invest in like very early projects, which is a big learning hurdle. But doing things with funds on chain is super fun for me. So for me, the trade-off is I have to be extremely careful. I've learned a lot of things about getting scammed. I get emails. I probably get 5 to 10 emails a day that are scam emails that are people
Me too.
saying my MetaMask has been hacked. I need to click here, which they're really just trying to get me to give them access to my wallet. So there's a big trade-off with security there, and you have to be extremely careful. I also get text messages as well. I've become
Yeah.
much more into securing my computer and my phone because of that.
Yeah.
But I think the trade-off of having ownership of my money, not having to worry about bank runs on Silicon Valley Bank, and I still hold, I don't know, 50% of my savings in just a standard bank. That way I have access if there's an emergency. I think that's important. And as it stands right now, I don't think anybody should have 100% of their funds on chain, even with the Balaji bet. But
Yeah. It's
yeah,
impractical. I mean, if you want to buy a coffee, it's very difficult for me, even in one of the largest cities in the world, to find a place that takes Bitcoin, right? So it's just
yeah,
not really reasonable right now. We're not at that scale.
yeah. But it is, I like the peace of mind of having funds, being able to send them to whoever the hell I want if they set up a wallet. And I think it's a net positive and a very good thing where I can see I don't have to worry if I'm holding USDC, which is a backed stable coin on Ethereum. I don't have to worry about Ethereum lending out on my USDC and then not being able to pull out those funds because the company who makes it, Circle, has them backed 1-to-1 with USD. And I'm very confident in that. So that's my big
Yeah.
draw for it.
Yeah, it's great. I remember I was explaining to somebody very close with who's quite a bit older than me, and he was I was just saying people love fast money. Like it's really that simple. What's the problem with having fast money? He said money's fast enough. And I think that that's sort of like an old school way of thinking, and there's nothing wrong with that. But ultimately, money's not fast enough. I really don't. I don't understand how. Like maybe you think that because you've seen money get faster, and you like
Yeah.
the fact that the internet has allowed for that acceleration is pretty powerful for somebody who maybe grew up in the '60s. But ultimately, somebody who grew up with the internet and saw the advent of music become faster by being able to download it the day the album comes out or the minute the album comes out, as opposed to having to go to go to the record store, buy the cassette, drive home, pop it in the tape player. Like there's it just like the immediacy of the availability is very interesting. I really love going to these crypto conferences. I was in Dubai recently, as I said 1,000 times, I'm sure. But ultimately we're not Venmoing each other back and forth because we're in a country that I'm not from. They don't use Venmo. A lot of these people don't even have USD. I don't want like Lira. I want USD. So
Yeah.
we're Venmoing back. We're effectively sending back and forth USDC like that, like
Yeah.
instantaneously, relatively, just to pay each other back for some beers, or like whatever it might be, like a hookah or something. And so the immediacy of that is very appealing for people who grew up with the internet because that's the understanding that they have of how, like I have cousins who are 15, 16 years old. They don't know that carrier pigeons used to send messages. They don't care. Like that's a cool, weird thing that'll be in video games or whatever. But they want for their money to send now. Like I don't think that there's any understanding with that when they're 30 and 15 years, there's going to be this delay. It's like,
Yeah.
what the hell is there a delay for? What
One
are
to
we waiting
three
for?
business days. What is a
What are you
business
waiting
day?
for?
Yeah.
Yeah. And also these markets don't close. I'm trading
Yeah.
back and forth at 3 in the morning, $50 USD instantaneously. It's yours.
Yeah.
It's no longer mine.
Yeah.
That's a really powerful notion. Also, there's no limits. I could send you 50 grand. I don't have 50 grand to send you. But if I could hypothetically send you a $500 million right now, and you can watch this money move on chain. You can watch these things happen.
Yeah.
There's no limit. There's no upward limit of those things.
Yeah. Which is a
also very
cool
powerful.
thing that exists right now that you can do. I think it's part of the reason we like it. And we think that it's going to evolve and get easier to use for people. And it's a good thing to be a part of from my
Yeah.
perspective.
At least to have some access to, right? I think that there's a lot, and this harkens back to the first episode where I went on my soapbox and yelled about nothing. I think that there's a massive opportunity for people who don't have banking infrastructure to have some sort of infrastructure as a result of being their own bank. And that sort of thing is going to be living in a place with no electricity where people never had landlines. They don't even know what a landline was. They don't know what dial-up was. They have a cell phone, and that's what a phone is to them. They don't even know that we had to go through dial-up. And that's like there's an incredible leapfrog that happens here, and we are not even close to seeing, because it's only been around for 30 years prolifically, the internet, and that's even stretching it. In 60 years, we're going to see a lot more growth. It's going to be very interesting to see the leapfrogs that happen in places that weren't subject to having a razor flip phone when they're in high school. Like it'll be very interesting to see like the advent of that and the immediacy of money that people are so used to because they don't understand, they don't even remember
Yeah.
because they weren't around. So we won't talk about banking. Eric really wanted to go off on these guys,
Yeah.
get in on Jamie, what's his name? Jamie Diaz or Jamie Dillon or something, whatever his name is. But
I don't even know who that is, man.
we'll say that for another time.
Yeah.
He's like the CEO of like some massive bank.
Wow.
But yeah, so wallets. I hope that that's helpful. Anything to add? Let's go. Do you have a hot take?
Ooh. Yeah, one hot take, I'll keep it short, is that AI GPT-4 came out 2 weeks ago, and I've been playing around with it daily, just exploring and reading other people's thoughts on how to get the best prompt. It's called prompt engineering. You write your prompt to it in a specific way to get the best output. You can feed it information. Has been fun to play with for me. Just going to a software like ChatGPT and saying, I want to have my meals planned for the next week and have them all vegetarian. How can I prompt you? How can I give you a prompt to get the best output for that result? It'll give you a prompt. You plug in that prompt, and then it gives you the output. Has been fun. So encourage people to go play around and ask ChatGPT for what the best prompt would be for what you're trying to get. And it really opens the eyes to like how cool that tech is, which is fun.
That's so true. Eric kind of turned me onto this, and what he means, like literally, is you pop it. It's a free tool. You pop into ChatGPT. It's like chat.openai.com or something like that. Just like Google search it, whatever, or DuckDuckGo it, and you ask ChatGPT how to ask your question. Like, I want to know how. My goal is this. How can I best prompt you to elicit a response? And it'll give you how to ask it the most effective way. It's holy crap. That's very meta. Very interesting.
That's super cool.
And I mean that meta in the traditional sense, not in this Facebook wannabe bullshit. I know. I just had to put that in there because I'm a fucking loser. What was I going to say? So my hot take is that you got to listen to music.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm always in like the top 0.01% every year when Spotify sends that thing out at the end of the year. Like, here's your really yearly recap. You're on the 0.01% of listeners. Like something like 100,000 minutes every year. It's ridiculous.
A lot of music.
And I just love music so much. I put it on in the morning, and I don't go to bed to it necessarily, but like I just love music, and I love to listen to albums. And recently, I've been actually when I was in Dubai, I was like, it's weird how you feel homesick. I'm a 30-year-old man, but like, you don't really feel like homesick. It's not like you wish you're with your mommy, but like you just like miss certain things about being at home, and like your body's all weird. It's a weird time of day. But ultimately, like there are some albums that really bring me back, and then sometimes there are new albums you listen to that kind of put you in a different place. And I had listened to this album by Mac Miller that I didn't really know that well. I forget the name of the album, but like it just like it was like after his like heavy hip hop phase, but before he got into like the more like romantic stuff, and then like his later albums were a little more like drug stuff. But like there's this one sort of like middle ground album that so I feel as though
movies with the sound off, or
no, that's that came out when we were seniors in college. I recently realized that. I was like, holy moly, this came out in 2013. Oh, that's so cool. Swimming is the name of it. It came out in 2018. Money. Like I knew it, but like
that was his last album. It came out
so good.
A few months before he passed away.
I remember, and it's like such a beautiful. It's like it's beautiful. So I'd encourage people to, not everybody's into Mac Miller, and that's okay. Not everybody's into hip hop, that's okay as well, obviously. I'm happy to give any sort of recommendations, whether it's rock, jazz, whatever it is, I'm down. But ultimately, listen to some music. I think it makes everything better.
Great, man.
Sweet.
Good catching up.
Speaking of music, Josiah Soren.
Yeah, he does our intro music. He has an NFT project called Lo-Fi Leopards. Check him out. Appreciate him letting us use it.
Seriously.
Yeah.
But awesome, man. Sweet.
That's a wrap, dude. Yeah. Catch you next week.
That's it. Can't wait, dude. Awesome. We'll tear down Jamie Dillon at that point. How about that?
All right. Let's do it.
All right, brother. Talk to you soon. Well done.